that comes along that they're reticent to make, and they didn't want to make it. It was 11 years I was trying to get them to do a Deadpool movie, but they finally did. I think that it's sort of, yes, I have, without any real control. I've done it before, but this film I was lucky enough I got to produce it, and I got to star in it, and I got to really sort of protect it, and I was so vigilant about the canon of Deadpool to make sure that we get every aspect of it right.
The test footage for the original Deadpool leaked onto the internet. Were you behind the leak?
That's a great question. I mean, I might have provided an assist.
Truthful.
But I was Scottie Pippen. Hey, I was just there doing my job, and
you were not
someone else gets all the credit.
Okay. Are all the characters you play just Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, sometimes Ryan Rodney Reynolds, unfortunately.
Truthful.
Hi friends, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. How is everyone? Blake Lively is accused of hijacking a film, illegally trying to steal a film from a production company, take over the production, the editing, and the distribution, and attempt to use her leverage and Hollywood power and dragons in order to force a studio to hand over rights to a sequel, allegedly. These are the allegations of Justin Baldoni in an amended complaint in federal court. In the complaint that was filed last month, his attorneys made a point to mention that Ryan Reynolds had once had a conflict with his Deadpool director, Tim Miller, and they spoke briefly in the complaint about what the motivation might be for Blake Lively. Was she motivated to follow in her husband's footsteps and use tactics that he used in order to achieve her goal of playing Lily Bloom indefinitely for like the rest of her life and career? Well, I did some digging, and yesterday we spoke about all of his businesses and the sort of smoke and mirrors that are around his businesses. His face is the face of businesses, but he's not as much of an owner or a business entrepreneur as you would assume. And now we're going to talk about the smoke and mirrors of Ryan and Blake as Hollywood bigwigs and producers, directors. And it all started back when Ryan Reynolds wanted to play Deadpool, the character of Deadpool from Marvel Comics, in a film. He had first portrayed Deadpool in a film, 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine, which featured Ryan Reynolds playing Wade Wilson, who becomes the character Deadpool. Ryan became very attached to this character, and he began to become obsessed with wanting to create his own film specifically for Deadpool, not as a part of X-Men, but as a part of just Deadpool and Deadpool alone. And it was his obsession with the character and his need for superstar, superhero, super anti-hero stardom that propelled him to work with other people like Tim Miller, who is the director of the first film, Deadpool. And in 2012, they convinced Fox to allow them to make some test footage for them of what a film could possibly look like for a Deadpool movie. In 2012, they made a couple minutes worth of test footage, and they gave it to 20th Century Fox. And instead of 20th Century Fox acting and greenlighting the project, it stuck it on a shelf. And for 2 years, that footage just sat there. And Fox kept refusing to greenlight the film. One of the biggest issues for Fox and for these other studios was that Ryan wanted to make the film R-rated. Deadpool became one of the first Marvel comics with an R-rated designation. It was raunchy, it had graphic scenes, there was nudity, definitely a different genre, definitely a different audience than the typical Marvel comic to major motion picture where you're marketing to children. R rating means that children under 17 years old cannot see the film. Somehow, magically, in 2014, in July, the test footage was leaked on the internet. And suddenly, once it was leaked, Tim Miller and others on Twitter associated with the film started telling people that it was important that they contact the studio to let them know that they wanted the film to be made. They started this sort of campaign on Twitter, like telling them specifically, go contact Fox, tell them they need to make this film, but they wouldn't say how the leak happened. It was like, oh my gosh, you guys, this leak happened, and suddenly we don't know who did it, but could you contact Fox and demand that they make the film? Now, leaking footage that does not belong to you, that is the copyright and intellectual property of Fox, is illegal. Tim, Ryan, or whoever leaked it could have gotten sued by Fox. They could have actually been charged if they wanted to press charges. Intellectual theft is actually a crime. I recently learned this. It's not just civil, it's criminal. So in order to get a film made, there was a group of 4 people that only had access to that footage. Ryan was one. And over the years, Ryan has done interviews crediting the fans for being the people that pushed Fox to release the film.
You know, we shot a little bit of test footage years ago. It sat on the shelf at Fox, nobody did anything with it, and then suddenly one day it accidentally leaked onto the internet, and that was about a year and a half ago.
Accidentally leaked.
And here we are. I mean, that was the fans that spoke. They spoke loud and proud, and they just overwhelmed Fox with response over the Deadpool movie. So they greenlit it within 24 hours.
Ryan would cagily avoid answering who leaked the film. Obviously, only a few people could have leaked it. And it was a big question in the fandom of how this footage got out there. But in interviews, what Ryan really did was he framed it like this accidentally leaked, but it was really the fans that authored the story. It's really the fans and their commitment to Deadpool and their commitment to wanting this film and their authorship of that got the film made. So they took a very unprecedented step by bypassing a studio, illegally releasing the footage, and then once the footage was out there, Fox had no other choice but to greenlight the film. And they gave him a pretty limited budget for the first film. Tim Miller was a part of that. He was the director, and the screenplay had been written years before. And as soon as the production started, Ryan admitted to being very controlling and sort of taking hold of it and wanting to ensure that Deadpool was a certain way, that he was true to form, that he was the way that Ryan envisioned. And it was that control of the first series and the fight over control that ultimately led to a breakdown between Ryan and Tim. And later in 2016, Ryan and Tim break up with each other. And Tim speaks publicly about why he ended up splitting from Ryan. And it really had to do with control. And in the amended complaint, they referenced this article from Men's Health. Tim said in an interview, "It became clear that Ryan wanted to be in control of the franchise. You can work that way as a director quite successfully, but I can't. I don't mind having a debate, but if I can't win, I don't want to play. And I don't think you can negotiate every creative decision. There's too many to make. So Ryan's the face of the franchise, and he was the most important component of that by far. So if he decides he wants to control it, then he's going to control it." And then he also stated that he doesn't want to ever be again in a situation where he doesn't have the control to direct. And he actually described working on that film set with Ryan as traumatic. Okay. So because Ryan was the face and he was Deadpool, he was able to use his power and his authority to get it and to get the franchise. And so when Deadpool 2 was made and released years later, Ryan was the one that was one of the screenwriters. He was a producer. His hands were literally all over it. He was the PGA producer, screenwriter, and he starred in the film. Deadpool 2 is the same film that ended up resulting in the death of a stunt woman in the very beginning phases of filming. Deadpool 2's filming was done in Vancouver, and they had to settle a lawsuit with the family, and his film set was found in violation of safety laws in Vancouver, and they had to pay the government $300,000. And there was also lawsuits. Despite that, it was an overwhelming success, and so was the first Deadpool. But throughout the process of making Deadpool, Ryan took the illegal step of, one, releasing footage illegally against the law, and then two, wielding his control and influence to cause a traumatic set experience for Tim Miller, which ultimately let Tim and pushed Tim out. And then he got a hold of the franchise and thus made 2 more films. Deadpool and Wolverine was released in 2024. It came out 6 years after Deadpool 2, and it broke box office. It was one of the biggest films in 2024, made over $1 billion at the box office. Ryan's technique and his means to obtain rights to films and breaking the law in order to do so is why a lot of people and why Wayfair believes that she saw what Ryan was doing and did the exact same thing. Because right before Book Bonanza, which is Colleen Hoover's event where she would have all of her fans go down to Texas. It was done in it was like a couple-day event where they would get together and fans got to meet authors. There were panels, they did meet and greets, and this would take place in June. And it was in April, according to the timeline filed in court, that Lively and Baldoni had been fighting about the editing. So it starts on April 3rd. Sony informs Wayfair that Lively has escalated her demands, now requesting solo time in the editing suite with her own editor, a shocking and unprecedented overreach. To make matters worse, Wayfair is told that Lively has made it clear that she won't promote the film unless the demand is met. Knowing the failure of the lead actress to promote the film would be detrimental, this maneuver felt less like a professional request and more like extortion, holding the film's marketing efforts hostage to gain creative control. Wayfair is left with no choice but to agree. The gravity of allowing her access to edit, a process typically reserved for the director and the post-production team, is not lost on Wayfair. It undermines the creative integrity of the project and set a troubling precedent, all while amplifying tensions between Lively and the team. On April 4th, the A-list producer reaches out to Lively and Baldoni in a group text to request that the 3 of them jump on a call to discuss time-sensitive things. Lively is not available that week to speak with Baldoni and the A-list producer, and ultimately did not speak to Baldoni directly about her demands. Or on April 4th, they were faced with yet another demand from Lively to edit the film on her own with her own editor. They found themselves with no choice but to assent yet again. They're forced to balance the need to keep the production on track while managing her increasingly audacious requests. They reluctantly agree to grant her 10 days in the editing room with her own personal editor, with the understanding that her ideas will ultimately be incorporated into Baldoni's director's cut. The concession reflects their continued effort to maintain progress. With each ask, Lively makes it plainly known that if she's not given what she wants, she will not promote the film at all. On April 17th, Sony Marketing and Baldoni coordinate efforts to have Baldoni attend Book Bonanza and show audiences a surprise early screening of the film. And then he shares emails with Sony execs saying, "Hi, Justin and Jamie. We heard that you love the idea of trying to screen the movie at Book Bonanza. We love it too. I think the key would be getting on board early so they can work out the details. Are you going to talk to her today? I have a call set with her tomorrow and I'm happy to pitch it." And then he said, "Yep, a call today." And then she's on board. She's going to have her event person join the meeting with you tomorrow to talk through logistics. So in a group text involving an A-list producer on April 18th, a Sony executive, Baldoni and Heath, they discussed the possibility of sending Baldoni's editor to New York, since Lively's preferred editor was not available. Heath emphasizes the importance of clarifying that while Baldoni had agreed to allow her into the editing process, it should not under any circumstances be interpreted as an endorsement of the idea. So she's allowed to edit, and right after they announce that he's going to be the one that will do a pre-screening, and they weren't going to show the whole film. They were just going to show a portion of it. This is when Lively gets kind of unhinged and starts making demands and threats about not promoting the film, not signing her contract. Other members of the production and cast and actors and actresses wouldn't promote the film. She says Colleen Hoover won't promote the film. She threatens not to sign her contract. She claims that she won't ask Taylor Swift to use her song in the film, even though it had been in the trailer. So she's every single time she's told no about something, she threatens and threatens and threatens and threatens. And during this period, they do a pre-screening to see how Baldoni's cut does, and he performs well. And then Blake demands that her screening get a viewing too, and that if she gets a viewing and her cut performs higher than Baldoni's, then her cut can be released. But her cut failed to perform well. So what did she do? When her cut performed lower in the under 35 demographic, which was the target demographic that they were looking for, hers was at 82%, his was at 94%. She took unprecedented steps to make sure that despite saying she would let them release his cut if she lost, she instead informs them that Lively is also going to be going to book Bonanza. And it's no longer going to be Baldoni going to book Bonanza, but Lively. On June 3rd, after she's lost and she refuses still to give up and let his cut be the one that's released, and she's still pushing, threatening. June 3rd, right before Book Bonanza, she's informed, or Baldoni's informed, that Blake's going to go to Book Bonanza now. And it says, Baldoni is informed that Lively would be attending Book Bonanza with Hoover instead of Baldoni. Jennifer Abel, his publicist at Jones Work, and Baldoni share a text exchanged disheartened at how things have unfolded. And the text says, Jamie just filled me in about BookCon. I know this is devastating and such a kick in the gut. It's pretty childish at this point. I'm just making sure you're okay. We'll get through this. Eye on the prize. Her attending BookCon is a win for the film ultimately, and if she wants to drag her ass to Texas, then let her. You can be home with your family, which is important. And then on June 5th, his editors are informed that they had heard from a secret source that Lively was incorporating a bunch of his cut back into her cut on June 6th. They get the official audience testings, and they do the comparison on June 6th. On June 6th, Baldoni is also hospitalized. But then on June 12th, they get informed that Blake Lively told Sony that she will be showing audiences at Books Bonanza her cut of the film, regardless of Sony or Wayfair's approval. Because Hoover's books were written for a target demographic of under 35, that's what they were looking at to determine whose cut would be released. And his performed at 94% overall total positive, and hers 83%. And as far as if they would recommend, only 59% of the people that watched her cut would recommend someone else see it, whereas 74% recommended for his. The other demographics, 35 and over, she performed a little bit better than him, but they were going for under 35 because the book's audience primarily was Gen Z. They're the ones that were talking about it on Book Talk. Those were the ones that were reading it. It was marketed as a young adult book or a young adult book. So they wanted to make sure that this audience is who wants it, and he won. So what did she do? She decided she was going to take her cut to Book Bonanza and share it with the audience without their permission, which is very much like what Ryan did with Deadpool. When she was getting no from Sony, we're going to release his, you didn't win, this is what happens. She leaks her version and shows the full version to her audience at Book Bonanza. 2,000 plus people see this cut. And by then, once all of these people have seen her cut, what is Sony supposed to do? Justin cannot at this point win. This is why it is so similar to what Ryan did. And I'll show you what she told the audience about this.
Can you line up for the signing today?
Wait, did you have this planned all along?
Oh, it was for the 20-minute clip, but I guess we have to show the whole thing. But
get in your buses fast because it's a 2-hour movie. So I'm just doing the math. If you're lining up at 8:45, you load into your bus. We gotta go. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then Brandon hasn't seen it, so we're gonna sit through it.
We just manifested that.
But
And just know, it's literally, this is not a bit. It's literally not done. So to be honest, what really happened is we were like, we're gonna show the movie, and the studio was like, no, you're gonna show 20 minutes. So we're like, no, we're gonna show the movie. And they're like, it's not done. And I was like, they don't fucking care. Let's just show them the movie.
Because you're gonna go again, aren't you? You're gonna go watch it in theaters too, twice.
And they were like, it's true. They were like, if everything's not perfect and it's not done, and what if we're going to change things? I was like, these are the people who authored the success of the book. You guys are what matter. And you guys seeing the movie is so important to us.
They had already had this all set up that they would be able to get a screening of Baldoni's cut. So the theater was secured ahead of time. But Blake wasn't satisfied and didn't want his cut shown. So instead, she took her cut and she brought it on a hard drive, on an airplane, and they didn't have a choice. And she showed the whole 2-hour cut to over 2,000 people. That wasn't perfect. That wasn't done. That wasn't signed off by the studio. That wasn't signed off by Wayfair, and that she didn't have permission to show. And then she almost seems incredulous that they already had the screening set up, because she's like, oh, did you have this all set up before? And Colleen even says, yes, for the 20-minute pre-screen. The 20-minute pre-screen of Justin's cut that was going to be shown. So when you think of how meticulous she was and how much she copied her husband, it's hard not to say that Ryan's hands were all over it. I know there's been a lot of comments lately in my comments that I'm somehow siding with Blake, and I'm part of the CIA's bot campaign to be pro-Blake, and I'm not pro-Blake. Or it's so important that all sides of this are shown, because it's not just Blake acting by herself. Yes, she's the one directing this when she's speaking to people at Wayfair, and she's making all of these demands with Sony, but she's at home with her husband, who is in part of this too, because Blake has stated over and over and over throughout the years that they do not do anything without the other. They are involved in everything together. And it's not a coincidence that she leaks this, steals this, and then takes the whole film and shows it to the audience. And does it illegally just like her husband. So Ryan's illegal leak of Deadpool forces 20th Century Fox to greenlight Deadpool. He then forces Tim Miller out by taking over creative control, and then makes Deadpool 2 and Deadpool 3. It's estimated that he earned anywhere from 20 to 40 million for Deadpool 2 and 20 million for Deadpool 3. But the real success he made and the real money he made was in the post-production, because he was the producer, he was the screenwriter, and he's getting a cut of not just his salary for acting, but also for being the one producing and releasing the film. And Tim Miller was cut out of all of that. And that's exactly what they were trying to do to Baldoni. Get him out, push him out, make it so difficult for the creative process, extort him, threaten him. And then once he submits the way that Tim Miller did, they can go on and make It Starts With Us. The problem is that they ran into a stumbling block. Deadpool 2 wasn't written yet when Tim Miller left. Ryan wrote it. So he had the rights to Deadpool 2. The obstacle with this, that is why it didn't work, is because Ryan and Blake didn't have rights to It Starts With Us. They didn't have rights to the sequel, so they couldn't do what they did to Tim Miller exactly. They took all the same steps as what Ryan did in Deadpool, but they didn't have rights to the sequel. And that's where it all fell apart. And when Ryan couldn't secure and buy out and force Wayfair to sell, that's when all of this sexual harassment stuff comes. When Ryan's marketing campaign fails, the blame for the backlash that Blake gets for that failed marketing campaign and her reputational damage is then shifted and blamed on Baldoni and Wayfair for a smear campaign. And yesterday in my video, someone in the comments said, well, why are you blaming Ryan for the marketing campaign? Because it was maximum effort that created the campaign. And that was Ryan's company. And Blake was implementing Ryan's company's marketing plan on the red carpet. And she was the one being rude in the interviews. She was the one refusing to talk about DV. She was the one trying to make it a rom-com. She was the one that's trying to make it for the masses and an upbeat film. Because in all honesty, more people are going to go watch an upbeat film and get hyped to go see like a funny movie than they're going to get hyped to go see a film about domestic violence. And so from a marketing perspective, it's clear that they were trying to manipulate the marketing to confuse people to go watch, even if it wasn't going to be delivered on what it was. The problem was the book and the message of the book was already so omnipotent with the fans and had so much meaning to those that read the book that the marketing failed. And instead of blaming themselves, now they have to switch and blame Baldoni and Wayfair. That's really why Baldoni's team believes she's modeling what her husband did. And it's clear that they will resort to mafia extortion-like tactics to get their way. And that's just not how things are done. And Wayfair was finally the one that stood up and said no. And now you're going to have a lot of people in Sony executives, Taylor Swift, all of these big names that are going to have to be deposed, that are going to have to come in and answer and say, what happened here? What happened there? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And it's going to put Sony in a very uncomfortable predicament because they allowed this and they knew it was happening and there's evidence to prove it. And despite what Blake says that this is a red herring and it doesn't change the fact that she was sexually harassed, it does though, because she never was going to report the sexual harassment. She never filed a complaint. She never went to the union. She's only doing it now after her reputation was damaged. And she's blaming a fictitious smeared campaign that never happened. And now she's the one using the CIA. And apparently some of you in comments think that I'm now a bot for her, but I'm not. I'm not pro Blake. But it's not just, we don't just hate on Blake here. We don't just hate on one person. We're not going to be anti just Blake. You have to show it all. And in my opinion, this is definitely Ryan and Blake all over it. So are you surprised to hear about the illegal tactics they've taken and mafia type extortion that was used? Tell me in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. 60% of you are still watching every single one of these videos and not subscribed, so make sure to hit the subscribe button on your way out and click the bell so you never miss a video. Tell me all the things below and share this video with all of your friends. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.